Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast, where we explore personal development, spirituality, and science. I'm your host, Kris Ashley, and I am so excited for today's guest. He's doing some really incredible things in the world, so we're going to have an amazing conversation for you here today. First, couple quick announcements. Head over to the links in the show notes. You are going to find a lot. You will find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. You'll find ways to sponsor the podcast, ways to stay connected on social media, my courses, coaching, free workshops, free downloads, and all of the links for my amazing guest as well. And as always, this podcast is part of the Los Angeles Tribune Podcast Network. We are doing amazing things in the personal development realm. We have incredible events, both virtual and in person, pretty much once a month now. We have one in a couple days with Jim Quick and Joseph McClendon III, who's Tony Robbins' right-hand man. So come join us. We have a lot of incredible things we're doing. What if the one thing keeping you stuck is the way you think? Welcome to Change Your Mind with Kris Ashley, the podcast where science meets spirituality and mindset becomes your most powerful tool for transformation. I'm Kris Ashley, author of Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality, trainer, speaker, and lifelong seeker. For years, I battled trauma, depression, anger, chronic illness, low self-worth, and the weight of old stories. Until I discovered how to rewire my mind, reconnect with my divine nature, and consciously create a new reality from the inside out. This show is here to help you do the same. Each week, we explore the intersection of personal development, spirituality, and science, diving into topics like healing, emotional mastery, entrepreneurship, resilience, and the quantum nature of reality. You'll hear powerful stories, gain practical tools, and real conversations that will help you change your perspective, get unshakable confidence, and live the vision your soul has always known is possible. Whether you're navigating a major life shift, building your dream business, or seeking deep healing and alignment, you're in the right place. So if you're ready to break through, take back your power, and create a life on your terms, this is your moment. Let's break free from the patterns that hold us back, awaken to who we truly are, and rise. Your transformation starts now. All right, and with me today, I have Matthew Ungs. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yeah, you got it exactly. It sounds
okay. I just realized I didn't ask you. Okay. So Matthew Matthew is the founder and creator of Patient Fairness, a one-of-a-kind platform that is dedicated to helping people lower or eliminate unfair medical bills here in America. In his own words, I started Patient Fairness to give power to patients when they otherwise might be vulnerable to the high prices and iniquity fostered by providers and health plans. Patient Fairness helps patients stick up for their rights as consumers and challenge instances in which they are not treated fairly. Matthew himself has been in the healthcare industry for many years prior to starting this and has been an advocate for change in people's well-being. So welcome, Matthew. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So incredible. I'm already impressed. I'm sure listeners are already impressed. But I always start my podcast the same way, and that is by asking my guest, what is their origin story? So what is it that put you on this journey to start Patient Fairness?
Well, I started in healthcare, and I was on the health insurance side. I started about 30 years ago. And one of the reasons I got into it was I saw an opportunity for patients to take control of their own healthcare and really focus on what makes sense for them in terms of decision making and cost. And I saw actually, the age of HMOs were, back in the 30 years ago in the 90s. I actually saw that as a positive thing in many ways because customers were able to save a lot of money and things were set up for them to really, it was really catering to keeping them healthy and also making sure they had appropriate access to care. And really over the years, as I manage provider networks, over the years, I saw insurance companies and providers continuing to work together to benefit themselves. But what it was leading to just always seemed to be higher costs for services for patients and higher premiums, cost to the patients as well as their employers if they were employer sponsored for health insurance costs. And I really didn't see anybody looking out for the patient's interests. I would often be negotiating with hospitals and physicians on behalf of insurers and realizing the prices that I was negotiating were completely unaffordable to the patient, but it made sense in terms of that insurance provider relationship. And it just wasn't fulfilling at that point. Once I sort of came to the conclusion that, look, I'm not making things better for the overall system. I'm making a decent living at this, but that's not really what I'm here to do. I'm not just here to collect a paycheck. I want to feel like I'm contributing. And so I thought the best way to sort of take a turn for the better was to try to do something that helps patients directly. And what I know is I know how to negotiate with hospitals and providers. I know the ins and outs of that. I know what a fair price, or at least what I think a fair price is, or what might be accepted. So I took all of those skills and said, how can I turn that into something that's valuable to patients? And so that's why I started Patient Fairness, was to sort of get out of a situation where I was representing one large profitable insurer against a large profitable health system, and started to say, how can I represent patients that often don't have anybody representing them in terms of healthcare bills, or how to navigate the system in terms of costs and services. And so that's why I started Patient Fairness. I did it a little at the end of my career, but I decided better late than never in terms of sort of taking a step that I feel better about what I'm doing for a living.
Yeah, that's so amazing that you're out there doing that. And I think you nailed it. Like, sure, we can make all the money in the world, but if we're losing sleep at night over like what we're involved in, like that's not why we're put here on earth, right? Like that's not good karma. That's not a good quality of life, right? I always talk about, you can be rich in all of these areas of your life, like a big mansion or a car or whatever, but you can be bankrupt in other areas, and like your health is a huge one, right? Or just like feeling bad about what you're doing for a living. So that's really incredible that you started this. So how does it actually work? Like if someone wanted to benefit from it.
I'm sorry, Kris, you cut out there for a second. I just
Okay.
heard the tail end of it.
I just asked. Yeah, I asked, how does Patient Fairness work?
Right. So we're all about helping patients to dispute medical bills that they don't think are fair, they don't think they should owe, or maybe they should not owe the total amount billed. And so we're set up to make it really easy. We have a website, patientfairness.com, and if they go there, they can upload a medical bill, upload some other information about how their insurance company might have paid that claim or denied the claim, and some other information. And we'll go through that. They answer a few more questions, and we'll come back to them. And first, without any charge, free of charge, we'll say, hey, we found some issues. If we didn't find any issues, we'll let them know as well. But here, we'll let them know what sort of categories that we found that might be cause for them to dispute that bill. And if they want to proceed with us, we'll create a customized letter of dispute that will go out to the provider certified mail. So we're tracking that. We know they received the letter. And then from there, we're guiding the customers along every step of the process to when the provider responds and what depending upon the provider's response. Sometimes they might agree right away and say, you're right, you got some good points. Sometimes they might disregard everything that the customer said and say, we think we're right, or oftentimes they'll just ignore the letter entirely. But we have strategies around all of those areas that will guide that customer throughout the process to get an outcome that they're comfortable with. It's always the customer representing themselves, and that accomplishes a couple things. One, it keeps the cost of our services down, but more importantly, hospitals, physicians, they're much more accommodating to their patients than they are a third party. Like if I were to call up a hospital and say I'm representing Jane Doe, they would look at me like a hired gun, like a million other people they deal with. But if it's their patient saying, look, I don't think I was treating fairly, I'm your customer, they're much more receptive to that. So in the spirit of what I mentioned before about giving power to patients, we're trying to create consumerism within healthcare where patients stick up for themselves, and they're going to also be the judges of, yeah, I'm satisfied with what the hospital or physician's offering me on this dispute, or I'm not, and that's their decision. They can decide whatever they want to do with that dispute. It's not myself or patient fairness making those decisions for them.
That's good to hear that hospitals and healthcare providers and insurances are more receptive to the patient, because I would have almost thought it would be the other way around. Like, ooh, there's a big third party coming in. I don't know if they have lawyers or what. Like, we better pay attention, versus like, oh, it's just like another small person. I can just kind of like, blow this off. But it sounds like the opposite. So that's really actually amazing to hear. So you basically just guide them. Like, is it like legal advice, or just like, hey, this is how the insurance companies work, and here's the language to use?
Right. So we definitely don't offer legal advice. I'm not an attorney, and we don't. So we're not offering legal advice. But you don't have to be an attorney to know that there are certain laws out there that offer protections. The No Surprises Act on the federal level is a big one. So we do a lot of we make it very clear to the customer to say, okay, this law is out there. You can use this as a dispute, and you can cite this language here if you want. And so what we do draft the letters for them. So depending about the content they want, we're giving them all of that information, and we're producing the letter for them. So we have it set up in ways that they're making the decisions, they're providing information, but in no way are they expected to write their own letters. They click and the letter goes out. So we're there to really help them throughout the process and not expect them to come in with special knowledge or expertise. We have that for them. But I do think it's fair to say that if it's a type of case that, look, this is going to go to court, or they're getting sued, we're not the ones to represent them if it goes to that level. But that's so rare. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but there's no reason to pay, for an attorney and thousands of dollars up front to give us a shot to help the customer represent themselves. And chances are they're going to get an outcome they're satisfied with and not have to go down that legal route of a lawsuit or something. But if it comes to that, yes, they would want it. They would need an attorney to help them in that standpoint. But it's kind of like going to H&R Block versus a tax attorney. Yes, if it comes to it, maybe you need a tax attorney to represent to go with the IRS. But chances are you can use TurboTax or H&R Block or something like that, and you're going to get a fine outcome and stay within the bounds of what's appropriate.
So what do you do when the insurance companies just don't respond to the letter? You said that happens often.
Yeah, well, so one point is we are involved with disputing medical bills. So we don't. Our focus is not to complain to an insurance company that you didn't pay my claim. A lot of our customers are uninsured, so our services are to go to the hospital, the physician, whoever is billing, and say, look, I don't think this bill is fair. You're billing too much. I never agreed to pay for this. You weren't allowed to. You can't just surprise me with this bill and say you're an anesthesiologist that put me to sleep for the surgery, but I had no idea that you weren't part of the hospital and we're going to bill separately. So our services are aligned around disputing bills that are issued by medical providers.
Got
and
it.
they don't. And this is something that a lot of customers sort of need to be, have some explaining to what happens is a lot of providers don't respond. But when they don't respond, most of the time they're not responding because they've moved on. They might never send that bill again. They're not going to acknowledge that
Got
with
it.
the letter, but they realize they've got maybe that person has 150 bills that they've got to, that he or she's got to follow up on that day. And so they look at that and say, that's complicated. I'm just going to ignore that. I'm not going to tell the person they're right, but I'm just not going to bill them anymore. They made some good points, or I
Like
don't
maybe in their computer they'll just be like resolved, but they won't
right,
take the time to
right.
send a letter.
And so
Interesting.
the other thing is, if even if the provider does ignore the letter of dispute but continues to bill, it's another important. You've got the money. The customer has leverage, in fact, more leverage than they ever realize. When you look at that situation of, let's say it's Mayo Clinic, this huge hospital, or we'll just call it ABC Hospital, a very large hospital system that has billions of dollars in assets, and they're billing me, just a regular person, for $1,500. Well, I've got $1,500. They want it. Who's got the leverage? I actually have a lot of leverage on that claim, because they want my attention. They want me to pay that claim. So there's nothing magical. It really doesn't help the provider to ignore that.
But
And and it's also costly for the provider to decide, look, I want to take this person to collections. Well, if they do that,
that's what I was gonna ask. Like, couldn't they send it to collections?
they might. If it's under $500, you can't do anything.
Uh,
That's so if it's under 500, you can't do anything. So that's important. You really, they can't send that to collections. They can't do an adverse credit report. But if they do send it to collections, if it's over 500, then that can be, then we will help you share the letter of dispute with the collection agency, with the credit agency, Experian or Equifax, and say, look, I disputed this. The provider never even responded. This is not a legitimate debt I owe. That's a very rare, it's really a big minority of providers, or a small minority, I should, of providers that actually use collections and report medical debt. It does happen sometimes, but even if they do that, they're spending a lot of money to do that, and they're not necessarily going to have any more success when they do that. But I don't want to always paint it as a complete rosy picture, that there aren't some bumps in the road here. But ultimately, patients need to have some backbone and say, look, if you want to try to take me to collections, that's fine, but I know it's not fair. I documented to you why I didn't think this is fair, and the fact that you ignore this is not going to make me just go away and write you a check. And I think I think a lot of people sort of have this idea that everything's stacked in the favor of the provider, like everything they get to control everything, and it
yeah.
appears that way. But when you make good arguments and you have facts behind you, and sometimes legal arguments or the law behind you, I don't want to imply we're giving legal advice, but if you have the law behind you in terms of consumer protections, you've got a lot of power. And the fact that they want something paid on that bill, if they think it's owed, that you have negotiating power too. So we're all about letting the patient decide when they think it's right to settle, what they think is fair. But they have a lot more leverage and power, I think, than they realize. But the way to be successful is not to do it out of fear, constantly like, oh, the provider is not responding, I better pay it. Like, no, think about it. Who's right on this? Who's really got the upper hand? If they want your money, you've got leverage that they don't. That you've got the money they want. So don't act like they're in complete control. You actually have a say in this as well. And in most economic situations, nobody would ever be expected to pay for something they never heard the price on, or were never told they were going to get billed for it. If I went to a water fountain and got a bill a week later, hey, here's the amount you charge you for how much water. Like, well, you should have had a sign there. You should have had
Right.
something to notify me.
I feel like the advice you just gave is such good life advice for so much more than this. That, like, hey, you have to be your own advocate, you have to grow a backbone, you have more leverage and power than you realize. Like, you could put those statements on so many things. Like, people tend to give their power away so much, especially when there's some sort of authority. And I think and don't do the research and don't stand up for themselves. So I just wanted to like throw that out there, that statement can be used in so much more. So what kind of medical issues do you see the most? Like, is there something that you've like really noticed people get taken advantage of over?
The biggest items are that they're being billed for prices that they don't think are fair, and that can come from a couple areas. That if you don't have insurance, you're going to get billed a rack
A lot.
rate, a lot, which is a lot, because coming from the insurance side, if I negotiate, the insurers negotiate a discount, say, well, we want 50% off of whatever you bill. Guess what's going to happen? The bill prices go up. So yeah, they're
Yeah.
getting a 50% discount, but it's off of an increased price. And think about over years and years that keeps compounding to make these prices just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So there's the combination of they don't understand why they're expected to pay a particular price, whether that's without insurance, which we talked about, but even with insurance, the relationship with the health plan and the providers are just of a nature where contracts and prices get negotiated without any real understanding of is this really an affordable rate for a chest X-ray or an MRI? The insurers don't necessarily care about that, and the providers don't either. They're just looking at an overall amount of money that's going to be changing hand between those two big corporations. So the price level is certainly one of them. Um, the other area is that essentially the customers, the provider's not telling them that they're out of network. So they're going to the provider thinking that they're in network with their insurance, and then later the provider says, "Oh, well, I don't really participate." It's like, well, I thought you said you work with them. Oh yeah, we work with them. We submit a claim to them, but it doesn't mean we're in the network, and you're going to be
That's
billed
so
for whatever.
shady.
Yeah, and whether it is shady, but I think it gets back to what you sort of highlighted before about taking responsibility and looking. A lot of people will say, "Look, I'm just going to be a passive vessel as I go along this healthcare system, and I'm going to rely on the insurer or the provider to look out for my interests." And they're not always going to do that. I'm not saying
Right.
that they have ill will towards patients or their customers. I don't think that's true most of the time, hardly any of the time. But they're looking out for their interests first. So
Right.
so we try to just make sure that, okay, if you weren't if you didn't necessarily know this was going to happen, you're not going to be out of luck, because you can fight this on the back end to say, look, I had a right to know this and you didn't tell me, and maybe I do owe you something for this, but I'm not going to pay you $200 for the 3 Tylenol tablets that you provided me here. That's just not fair. I didn't agree I was going to pay that, and let's talk about what a fair price might be.
So one of the things you said is like, the price of an MRI, but like what if the price of an MRI is set? Is it more so that like before the patient got it, they weren't like, hey, the prices of an MRI is X amount of dollars, and like showed them the bill before they paid it? Or is it more like, I think that's too expensive? Because to some extent it's like, okay, but everyone else pays that price. You know what I mean?
But they don't. See, that's the thing. Healthcare prices are so opaque. It's it's
Mm,
it's amazing. You could have I would imagine that at that MRI machine, you could probably take 10 random patients who went through that MRI machine that day, and you'd probably find 8 or 9 different prices paid for that same test.
really?
Yeah, because Medicare is going to have its own rate. All the insurers are going to have their own rates.
Got
If
it.
somebody is indigent and they're poor, and they let the hospital know up front, they might get a self-pay rate that's cheaper. There's maybe maybe Bill Gates is one of those 10, and he pays the rack price because he can afford it. And so it's definitely a misimpression for any customer or patient to think, oh, I'm asking for an exception. I'm asking for something special, and feel guilty about that. No, hospitals and physicians are constantly revising their prices for specific situations, because they're always going to want to maximize what they can get. And so they
Hmm.
realize, I can't get that as much money off of this particular patient because maybe they have limited means, but I'll offer them this discounted price. And the key, I guess, getting back to your question is to expect what's called a good faith estimate, which is the hospital or the physicians telling you up front in writing to say, look, my best estimate on your situation, if you're using insurance, if you're not, whatever it is this is what you're going to be expected to pay. And at that point, the customer is able to say, look, I can't afford that, or I don't think that's fair, or maybe it is fair. You don't have to complain if you don't think if you're happy with what they're offering, but at least you're agreeing to it up front. And it
Right.
also requires the provider to have some level of embarrassment, maybe if they put a price out there before the patient has a service. Like, let me get this straight. You're wanting me to forget my college education for my kids because to pay for this. Like,
Right.
it's a lot easier to send a bill out with a provider's price somebody's never seen than it is to show them that outrageous price before they get the service, and they don't want to lose a customer. So there's always you're in a very good situation up if you can negotiate that up front too. Our focus is on the back end, but if that good faith estimate, if it's provided, that's a fair way to treat somebody, because you can charge as much as you want, but you really do have an obligation to let them know what those prices are going to be up front if you expect them to pay it.
And then when you get that, and I'm learning so much today, so thank you for this. So if you get that good faith estimate and you're like, that doesn't seem like a fair price, like, do you have power ahead of time, or are they going to be like, okay, we'll go
Yeah,
somewhere
because
else?
the No Surprises Act, and a good faith estimate can go beyond the No Surprises Act. But the No Surprises Act, for those listening that don't know about it, was a federal law that went into effect in January 2022. And right now, the good faith estimate is geared around persons that are self pay, that don't have insurance. There are provisions for people that have insurance, but the Department of Health and Human Services hasn't come out with the specifications on how the good faith estimates work for insured people yet, but they still have those protections. So to your point, I'm sorry, I just lost your question. What was it? What the
I was
negotiate?
asking,
Was it was able to
are you
negotiate?
able to like negotiate
Oh
ahead
yeah,
of
yeah.
time? Yeah.
Yes, yes, you are. So that's a that's just like anything. Like going to a car. If somebody said, "Are you able to negotiate at a car dealership?" Yes, you can. Well, do
Yeah.
I have to? No, you don't have to. They're gonna. You can pay the sticker price, and maybe that's something that's fair. But there is no reason in the world why you can't negotiate, and you shouldn't negotiate. If you just think about all the things in life where you don't necessarily pay the rack rate for something. It's just expected that you negotiate. Obviously, automobiles is a good example, but there's other ones too. That if you go through life just saying I can't negotiate healthcare prices, that's become such a large portion of our economy. You're giving up a huge amount of your budget into something that is paying two, three, four times more than other people are paying for the same service. I don't know. Maybe a good
Mm.
example would be just if when you travel, you never look and book hotels and shop around ahead of time. You just show up at the hotel and pay whatever they want you to pay at that moment, and it's 8 o'clock at night. Yeah, you're probably going to have more trouble getting the best deal. So, but oh, back to your point, and I'll try to be a little more succinct on the next answer. But
Mhm.
they also have to give good faith estimates, depending upon how soon the services are coming up, anywhere from like 3 days to 10 days in advance, prior or within a couple of days of that being scheduled. So the the timing of the good faith estimate is geared around the customer being able to say, look, I'm going to hold off on this for now. I'm going to find out if I can get a better price, or I'm negotiate. So you're not caught on the last minute on the operating table and they hand you a good faith estimate, and then what are you going to do? So it is situated where the timing is they get the patient gets that far enough in advance where they can actually do something with it.
That kind of brings me to my next question, which is like, you say that like you have this power, but like, do they take advantage of people in desperate situations? I'm just thinking about like, I have an 11-month-old, and it, like, God forbid anything happened to him, like I would pay anything, right? To like help him in a desperate situation. Like, does that happen at all?
I, I mean, I don't. I want to be careful how I word this. I don't know if "take advantage of" is the right word,
Okay.
but if you there's a lot of. I mean, if there's limited amount of options, then tend that the prices are going to be what in economic terms are often called inelastic, meaning they don't vary a lot based upon what the customer's demand level, because the demand is going to be there for that emergency room visit no matter what, especially a child's
Right.
visit. So when you look at emergency room prices and emergency room physician prices, they tend to be really high because they know that a lot of that there's not a lot of opportunity necessarily to to negotiate. I mean, there's no opportunity. You're there
Right.
if you're there for a good reason. You don't have you need services. You don't need to be negotiating. So in those situations, it's really more after the fact that we step in and say, look, this was an emergency. There was no way the patient could have negotiated this, but nonetheless, they never agreed to pay your prices. And so it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be something paid, but it still means I have a say in this as a patient. I'm your customer, and we didn't agree on this up front, so let's work on it now. Again, to answer your question, I think people, you can call it being taken advantage of. I might too, but prices are set to maximize the revenue for the hospital or the physician if they're paid. And but there's always opportunity. It doesn't mean it's always going to be a cakewalk, but there's always opportunity to come back and say, look, I didn't know this was going to cost this much. I think we should agree. We have to agree on something mutually around this, and otherwise, I'm not gonna pay this bill as you charged it. And so again, it does get back to the patient and so having a backbone and saying, look, I'm going to stick up for myself. Sticking up for yourself doesn't mean that you get free care and everybody's there to serve you without any um, recognition that their time is valuable too. Now, it doesn't mean there's a lot of instances where the medical bill should go away, and it does go away. But there's also instances where it's like it's not necessarily free, especially if you don't have insurance. But the goal is to find something that's fair for both parties. When if you look at the cost to charge ratio that Medicare produces, and we provide that information to customers too to say, hey, did you know that this $10,000 bill really costs the hospital $1,500 to provide the service? So there's an $8,500 markup on that $10,000 bill. Well, that's ridiculous. If you
Yeah.
paid $10,000, you probably would feel like you just got taken advantage of. But if you
Yeah.
paid whatever, $2,000 or $1,600, something a little above their cost, or maybe at their cost, if or a little below if you're in a bad. But the point is, once you get that information, we provide that type of information. It really puts the customer in a better situation to understand. Oh, I see. This is what it really means to this hospital. It's $10,000, but 8,500 in profit. That's a lot of room for me to negotiate.
Yeah, that really puts it into perspective for sure. So do you do any work with like drugs? Like if people are trying to get like, I don't know, like diabetes medication or something like that, and they're getting charged, like they're getting marked up like crazy?
We don't do the retail side of pharmacy. So
Okay.
there are circumstances when patients get drugs administered at a hospital or physician office where the hospital or the physician is billing for that. Typically, that's an injectable drug or a drug infusion. And if it's a medical service like that, yes, we will help on those types of issues. But we don't handle the traditional prescription drug of going to a pharmacy, Walgreens or whatever. There are a number of other services out there. I'm not really able to recommend a specific one, but there's a lot of services that will help persons that have that want to find lower cost drugs, especially on the front end. But we are focused on medical services, hospital physicians primarily, and more back end of challenging a bill after it's received.
Yeah, didn't Mark Cuban start one? Wasn't that who that
Yeah,
was?
he started one that works with employers. So they he started a whole new model where employers can offer benefits for prescription drugs through his company. And so yeah, he started one. It's been fairly successful so far, but I'm not in a position to speak to how well that works compared to others. But yeah,
Okay.
he has found some traction with that.
Yeah, that's great. So I probably have all the details wrong, but I was just saw this like when I was scrolling Instagram that there's some, I don't know if it's like a lawsuit or some law passed or something where there were all these insurance companies that were also owning pharmacies, so they were hiking up prices and like steering patients towards certain drugs. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, yeah, it's the
It was
allegation
just in
there.
the
And yeah,
news.
there's a lot of there's been so much consolidation over the years. Like for example, CVS Pharmacy, the ones that you see on street corners, pretty in most cities, owns Aetna Insurance, and so they own Aetna, the health insurer. Aetna has its own pharmacy benefit management company that will try to will serve employers and other entities in terms of offering administering prescription drug benefits to the employees. And a lot of the times those entities, when they're integrated like that, they have some incentive to say, well, I'm going to make sure these employees all go to CVS or as many of them as I can because I'm the PBM, but I'm owned by CVS, so that helps my side of the equation. And so there's some scrutiny around that. I'm on this call. I'm not in a position to say that that's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's the concern that some people have, is that there's a conflict there, that people might be being steered into pharmacies that really aren't better for the customer or the patient, but just help that PBM or the parent company of that PBM. And so some people have concerns around that. I'm generally not a person that having come from the insurance side of the industry, there's a lot wrong with it, but I would be I don't think you'd have a lot of faith in me or what I'm saying if I said it's all corrupt. Like, well, why'd you work there 30 years then? It's not. Yeah, there. I think there's some things wrong, but I don't. Some of the criticism the industry gets might not be fair as well. But I'll just leave it there.
Well, here's another thing you're probably not going to want to comment on is what was it like 2 weeks ago? I
Yeah,
mean, from when we're filming this December 20th. A couple of weeks ago was when the United Healthcare, right? That was who it was.
yeah. The CEO.
CEO was shot. And I'm sure you see all over social media people celebrating, which I personally think is pretty disgusting because he was a human who was here incarnated and a soul and had a
Right,
family.
right.
Um, but it just speaks to the general idea and consensus of people and how people have been treated by insurance companies and their perspective on it. So, I know you probably don't want to comment, but I'm going to ask you if you have any thoughts about all of that.
Well, I think it is a good example of what happens when third parties um, insert are I don't even know if they are involved in making decisions for people, and those people aren't comfortable with the decisions they're making. So yeah, I mean it's not manufactured outrage. I mean, clearly, I agree. It's not. I don't like to see people, cheer when a human loses their life or that happens. That's not appropriate. But the frustration is real from people, and so there's no
Totally.
denying that. So I don't want to ignore that.
Yeah.
My take is, and I'm not going to solve that on with patient fairness on its own, but I think one of the advantages of patient fairness is it's the customer just totally patient looking out for themselves and not relying on the insurer to handle that for them, because they might not trust the insurer, and maybe they
Yeah.
shouldn't trust the insurer for that. Just like they might not they might not want to trust a hospital to look out for their interests when they're billing them either. They might be looking out for their own interests, and I imagine they are a lot of time. So I think it is unfortunate, sort of the to take stock or satisfaction in somebody's murder, but but I think it does point out there's a real issue there about people that feel like nobody's looking out for them, and they're paying all this money in and they're only paying about a fifth. So what's taken out of your paycheck for insurance is a lot of money, but multiply that by 3 or 4 times, and that's what the employer is probably paying for you. And so it's just a bad cycle where people keep paying more, they keep thinking they're getting less. So I don't, again, patient fairness isn't going to solve that, but at least we're an outlet where one of our value statements is that we are aligned 100% with our customers. We're always going to look out for their interest. There's never a situation where we have one customer that, oh, well, maybe this hospital, again, we're not making, the customer makes their own decisions, but we're never going to trade off one customer's dispute because it helps on some other disputes, or it helps us make more money some other place. We
Yeah.
always are about that particular customer and what's good for them. And so, at least in that way, we probably are different, better experience maybe than they get with sometimes with providers or insurance companies. But yeah, coming from the insurance company side, yeah, it's not. It's I don't. Yeah, it's not pleasant to think about. That there are people out there that think the right way to solve it is to perform violence or to take a life.
Yeah, I think that was a really great answer, and I really agree with everything you said. And maybe had um, what's his name, Luigi, gone to you guys, there might have been a problem solved. But it, it's such a hard thing because we do live in this capitalist society, and companies do need to make money, and CEOs report to boards, and like they don't have as much control as maybe people think they do. And and other people are, unfortunately can be, I don't want to use the word victims, but they can be treated unfairly, and don't have as much. And it's like I don't know how to solve it, right?
Right.
I kind of see all the sides. um and as someone who's two parents, especially my mother has battled a lot of illness. She's been very, very, very ill for a long time. I really do empathize with all of that. um it's tough, it's super tough. But you're out there doing something that might be able to help that kind of situation, so good for you.
Yeah. Well, yes.
um
Uh, Thank you.
So we don't have a ton of time left, but I did want to ask you a little bit, just, because this podcast is really focused on personal development, and I've had a lot of entrepreneurs on. So I want to talk a little bit about like the entrepreneur side of starting your own company and what that looked like and how you went about doing it, because I know there's probably a lot of people out there who want to start a company that's doing good for the world and helping people, and they don't know where to get started. So I would love to just hear a little bit about your journey and just starting the company.
Sure. So when I left employment on the health plan side at the end of 2000 or 2020, excuse me. And I was really burnt out for a variety of reasons, some of which I covered earlier. I just wasn't feeling good about what I was doing, and so I didn't have a specific plan at that point of what I was going to do. I ended up First, I wrote a book, and it was about healthcare and what I thought, what people didn't quite see the same perspective, so I wanted to give the perspective of an insider, and I did that. That was solely. I mean, I would have liked to. I like to sell books, but I didn't think that wasn't a big income producer. That was more of, yeah, I want to tell people what I think, and also from a self image standpoint, I wanted to prove myself I could write a book and do it in a way that I was satisfied with.
Yeah.
And so that was part of that was part of it after leaving. And then the really decision around to start patient fairness, it wasn't so hard as much as it was just sort of going about it. I remember even just opening up a checking account under the business name once I filed as a corporation and that sort of thing took some that actually took a little bit of courage just because I wasn't used to moving my money around and suddenly I was moving money into this other entity that were, was always under my own name and stuff. But I would say kind of just jump into it, be prudent. You obviously, you're probably not going to start Amazon, a competitor of Amazon in the first 5 months or whatever. But think about what you want to do. Think about how much what realistic how you can realistically accomplish that. I was able to look at a web-based structure that could be built, and I knew it was possible because I see a lot more complicated things out there for other areas of commerce. And so for me, it was more around just getting comfortable around, yes, I think this is possible. I have a game plan. I used a ton of resources with friends and colleagues to kind of talk through the idea and I have no idea how to build a website. So I would talk to friends that were in that area and get ideas where I might go for that to find the right service or right assistance for that. So I think I didn't always, I didn't always have a burning desire to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I spent 30 years as an employee of of corporations or different businesses, and I didn't mind that. That was fine. It just came to a point where I felt like if I'm going to be employed again, I'm not going to be controlling what I'm doing. I'm gonna have to do what was expected by others, which is why I'm getting a salary. But if I start my own business, perhaps I can make a living at that at the same time setting the priorities that I think are important. And so it's I don't want to say it's easy, but it's also not necessarily always as daunting as it might seem. I guess part of it depends on what the person's idea is for the business and that sort of thing. But I find it rewarding. I'm not Mark Cuban yet, so nobody's gonna ask me how I made my first billion at this point, and they probably never will. But I'm doing this to make a living, but not to make a fortune. And so I think it just depends on what the objectives are of the person. But in my situation, I could afford to kind of take a step back, worrying about how much I was going to make next year, as much as I wanted to focus on how am I gonna feel good about what I'm doing next year, not how much I'm making necessarily.
Yeah, I love all of that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when you started, was it just you giving people advice or did you bring on a team?
Yeah, well, I started right off the bat, or when I got something on, it was web based. So yeah, it was just myself initially. I had outside parties that were consultants and agents that were built out the website, and I've got one. I've got a couple employees now that help out that are U.S. based, and we've got some overseas persons that help too on the web design. But I've that's I think that's important surely for anybody is to kind of figure out, okay, how is this going to work financially? Because if you do need a lot of employees, you got to figure out, okay, well, I'm probably going to need revenue fairly soon too, unless I've got a lot of money saved up to pay those employees. So
Right.
the nature of what patient fairness is, it allowed me to build it out without having a lot of costs beyond just the build out of the website, which was intentional because once the website's built and it's operating, it can function pretty efficiently, and that means we don't have to pay people to do one-on-one counseling, and that means we can charge a lot less to the customers for what we do. A lot there are people that work one on one with they're called billing advocates, and if somebody wants to use one of those services, I have nothing against those services. I think they will provide a good job, hopefully, but they're also going to be somewhat expensive because who's ever on the other side of that equation working on your dispute or working on your bill is going to be making an hourly fee of some kind, and so that can add up really quickly, whereas our program is all automated in a way that it's easy for the customer to do things themselves, and so it's a lot cheaper than the alternatives.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's always, I mean, it's interesting for me, so I'm imagining it's interesting for listeners as well to hear how people are structuring their companies and how they get started. Just as someone I've sold one company and I own one right now, so it's always interesting to hear how other people are navigating it. Um, this has been so wonderful. Before we jump off today, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really want to like get out there? Any kind of message to people?
No, I think we covered
Okay.
the highlights. I mean, I would just ask any users that if they do have the need for our services, I mean, patientfairness.com, it's all one word, is where to go. And hopefully it's self-explanatory once you get out there and learn about what we do. But no, I think we covered the highlights, and hopefully it was helpful to yourself and those that want to listen to this.
Yeah, it was super interesting to me. And then I always end giving people the chance to promote themselves. You just kind of did. Is there anywhere else people can find you
Well, we're
or
on
anything?
Facebook, we're
Okay.
on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, but I do recommend going to patientfairness.com for the most broad and full understanding of what we do, and that's where you would access our services if anybody wants to use them. And as I mentioned before, it's free to, if you have a medical bill and you want to just see if there's reasons to dispute it, you can go through that process. We won't charge you anything. We don't take your credit card or anything about that until you
Wow.
decide, yeah, there are reasons I can dispute this, and then if they want to proceed, that's when they'll become one of our customers. But we do offer that free to assess any medical bill anybody has.
That's amazing. It has been so wonderful, Matthew. Thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much. I'm sure listeners did. If you are listening, please send this to someone you think could really use it. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Let's help make this world a better place together. Thank you all so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day.